Welcome back to Beyond the Uniform. I'm Justin Asiri, and each week I meet with military veterans to learn about their civilian career, in particular what they do for a military audience to understand how they got there, and advice for any other veterans that are seeking to do the same. Today's episode number 236, and today's interview is different in a couple of ways. First of all, it is a panel. It is three individuals. Hector Milan, Robert Brandt, and Tommy Jones, all three of whom work at Verizon. And it's a really fun interview for me because in this panel with three other people, able to look at a company from a variety of angles, a variety of perspectives, including one person who just joined Verizon and one person who's been there for over 22 years. So it's very fun to see the differing perspectives, the similarities, and to really get a holistic view at what life is like at a company. A second reason this interview is a little bit different is that, of course, it will be available as always as a podcast. This episode is available by video, so if you prefer that visual, you can check out the website beyondtheuniform.io. The interview will also be available on our YouTube channel. Let me know what you think about both the panel format as well as the video format, and if this is the sort of thing you enjoy, we will do more often. This is a great interview. I really appreciated the three different perspectives of Hector, Robert, and Tommy. There's a lot of ground that we cover in this interview. A lot of it is about Verizon and what their roles are like there. They each have different roles there, very, very different, distinct roles within the company. But I think that some of the things I took away was a lot of the advantages of working at a larger company, particularly the job security, the ability for upward mobility, and just the wide variety of the types of jobs there, as well as the formal training and mentorship program. One thing I didn't realize is that Verizon, there's a lot of veterans there. They actually have their own internal intranet to connect veterans and help them stay connected. And I think thinking about the other interviews I've done, how often veterans miss the community and camaraderie that they experienced in military. That's a great way that Verizon is doing to approximate that and help you get plugged in right away with people with your shared background. And each of the three people I interviewed talk about experiences of just running into other veterans or overseeing groups that are at least half veterans, and just preserves a lot of that community. As always, at beyondtheuniform.io, you'll find show notes. In this show notes, you'll find links to everything we discuss. We reference several different interviews that are relevant to this conversation. We talk about resources like LinkedIn and Glassdoor. You'll find more links there, as well as 240 other episodes just like this, minus the video and the panel format, where you can learn about career options for the military and how to succeed in your civilian career. So with that, let's dive in to my conversation with the Verizon panel and Tommy, Hector, and Robert. Well, joining me today in central New Jersey is Hector Milan and Robert Brandt. Thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to Beyond the Uniform.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for having us.
So I wanted to give, first of all, listeners and viewers abbreviated bio for both of you, just to set the stage, and then we'll dive into questions that get us deeper into your background. We'll start with Hector. He recently joined Verizon as a field operations manager, and previously he served in the Army as a master trainer, supervisor, and recruiter, retiring as an E7. Robert Brandt has worked with Verizon for 22 years, holding roles as a facility tech, local manager, and now as an area operations manager. In his current role, he leads 12 local managers and over 200 associates across 6 work centers, and he previously served in the Marine Corps Infantry. So to start things off, and maybe we'll start, Robert, with you, because your transition was the longest ago, but I'd love to have listeners and viewers learn a little bit more about when you left the military, what that transition was like, and in particular, what your first job search was like.
So for me, the job search aspect, I was lucky. It was really good timing for me to getting into Verizon. As I was coming out of the military, there was an opening in Bell Atlantic at the time. That's where I got hired into. My father was an employee and said, "Hey, you want to come work for the phone company?" And I was like, "Sure." So coming out of the military into civilian life for me was a little scary, to be honest with you, at first, because you're going from a very structured environment to a not as structured, I guess is the easiest way to put it. So coming out, there's a little hesitation, a little concern. But once I entered the ranks of Bell Atlantic at the time, I learned that they were managing their business almost the same as the military. So it was really easy for me. And then spent 16 years as a technician, took promotion to local manager, and did the local manager piece for 3 years to the day, actually. Got promoted to area manager, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Awesome. And Hector, your transition was much more recent. What was that transition like, and what led you to Verizon?
The transition was actually a little bit unnerving, to be honest with you, at the beginning. Not knowing exactly what, the transferable skills was going to be. But the Army, obviously, with the Soldier for Life program, allowed me the opportunity to go in for a workshop for retirees, retirement services workshop, that I ended up hearing about the corporate fellowship program under Hiring Our Heroes umbrella with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. So that's where I initially heard about the opportunities with Verizon. I tailored my resume accordingly with what I had done with my background as far as recruiting operations, supervisor, company first sergeant. And I know you mentioned retired as an E7, but I'm retiring as an E8.
Oh, apologies. Yep.
No worries. But it gave me the opportunity to talk about my background. And I received a phone call probably about 2 weeks after, where I was able to interview face-to-face with Robert Brandt, which you just met, and Robert Malloy. And it opened up my eyes to what Verizon actually was and the intricacies behind it that I was unaware of, and the different positions.
Good morning. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you great, Tommy.
Awesome. So it gave me the opportunity to explore the opportunities that Verizon had, and obviously with the research that I had done and being able to sit down with, again, Robert Brandt and Robert Malloy and Kevin Sheridan and a few other folks, made the transition over. It was actually pretty easy once I found out that the job entailed the skills that I had. That I felt that I was able to transition over pretty easily.
Awesome. And I'll introduce Tommy here in just a second. But Hector, you mentioned the corporate hiring program for hiring our heroes. Could you share a little bit more about that program, and for listeners, how they might look into it and why that might be a valuable support system for them?
I would definitely encourage them to go through the Soldier for Life program or office at whatever installation they are at. They normally have local Hiring Our Heroes, companies and organizations that fall into the time period that the soldiers either separating from service or retiring from service. So it does vary a little bit by region. Not all the companies are participating in all the different installations across the U.S. So I would definitely encourage them to reach out to the SFL TAP workshop schedules, and then also reach out through the Hiring Our Heroes. Very simple Google search will pull up the point of contact for their location. They can filter it, actually get in touch with the individual, and the individual responsible for the program, usually a program manager, will let them know as to the upcoming Hiring Our Hero workshops and when those dates are. Usually it's a 12-week program, about 3 to 4 per year. So it gives them the opportunity to better prepare prior to the start of that program, and what the participating companies and organizations are for their area that they would like to pair up with or gain additional information from, so that they could actually make a well-informed decision prior to separating.
Awesome. And for listeners, I'll add that in the show notes. So you have links to that so you can easily find more information about that. I also want to introduce Tommy Jones. To give listeners and viewers a quick background, Tommy is a senior manager of talent acquisition, enterprise sales and services, as well as the leader of military programs. He's been with Verizon for about 6 years and served in the Army Signal Corps as a non-commissioned officer, retiring as an E8. Tommy, maybe to kick things off, could you share a little bit more about what your transition was like from the military, and in particular, what that first job search was like for you?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I transitioned back in 2013 after 20 years of active service. And during my transition, I started the TAP program about 12 months out, went to a couple career fairs, thought, oh, this is going to be pretty easy. I checked all the boxes. I had a signal background. I had a bachelor's degree. And I didn't value the networking aspect of it. So when I went to career fairs, I was like, okay, well, I see that these people want to hire veterans. This is great. I didn't realize how difficult it would be. People really wanted, companies were really advocates of hiring veterans. But I don't think at the time that I was transitioning, they had a good understanding of what value I brought to their company. They didn't know enough about my rank. They didn't know enough about my responsibilities. And on the other hand, I didn't know enough about my corporate experience or civilian world, and how I translated my skills to them. So I met multiple recruiters who were excited to meet me and say, hey, I think we got great opportunities for you here at Verizon. And that kind of went radio silence. I communicated with them over and over again, and I got nothing from it. Not from a lack of their response, them trying, just that they had a hard time translating my skills and being an advocate for me. So I was a little bit disgruntled. I had applied to about 200 jobs across a bunch of different companies, around 55 with our company alone in Verizon. And being a signal person and having a comms telecommunications background, I thought it was a perfect match. Needless to say, people didn't understand what my background was, couldn't understand the translation. I had 0 interviews in the 200 applications that I applied to, 0 from Verizon, 0 from any company, AT&T. I mean, I thought it was a perfect match for me since I was from New Jersey and the headquarters is in New Jersey. So fast forward 6 months from separation, I ran into a Vietnam veteran, and this is where the networking aspect comes into play. And he was asking me what I was doing at Fort Dix. I said, well, I'm on active duty. I'm transitioning out of the military and getting ready to retire. And he said, well, what are you going to do when you get out? I said, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up, but I want to work at Verizon. I said, but they kind of didn't really respond to me, and I didn't get any offers or anything. He said, well, I'd really like to help out. I know some people at Verizon. And I was like, wow. So needless to say, I got my first entry point through a networking opportunity with a Vietnam veteran who I had just stopped to say thank you for your service to him, which sparked a conversation, which sparked an opportunity for me. And I can't stress the value of that in anybody's transition. You never know what opportunity is going to present itself to you in every interaction that you had. I learned that from the first non-commissioned officer that I had in the military. And he said, Jones, you're going to greet every person that you meet. And I was like, Roger Sergeant, okay, will do. And I didn't realize how powerful that was and how impactful that would be. It helped me with my transition, but it also helped me as a senior non-commissioned officer as I greeted, my service members in combat and seeing, hey, what's up there, soldier? How you doing? And they'd be like, good, First Sergeant. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound good, right? And it really plays a huge part in the development of leadership. So that was a little bit about my transition. I got to the other side and realized that what the challenges were from a veteran's perspective and what the challenges were from a corporate side. And then my basic focus in life from that point on was to just grab as many resumes as I can to help translate them to recruiters that are on the floor in our headquarters, and really sell them on the attributes and skills that veterans bring to an organization. And it kind of snowballs from there.
That's awesome. And I just want to, for listeners, point out in this is, I think, the 247th interview or so, how representative what Tommy just said is of, I don't think I've had a single person in 247 interviews who said, yeah, the transition was easy. It was a piece of cake, got out, had a job handed to me. It was in the bag. Almost every person I can think of has said it was more difficult than they expected. It took longer. I love that, Tommy, you shared those numbers, 200 applications. Just think about that, 200 applications and not a single response. Again, that's not unusual, but it's demoralizing to have that. And then to see the power of networking. And a lot of the people I've interviewed have talked about how in the military they viewed networking as a slimy word. It was something to be looked down on. And what I like, Tommy, and what you were just saying is that we may be calling it something different. Maybe we don't call it networking in the military, but that practice that you got into of just meeting people and saying hello and being courteous, I think that's common for most people in the military. That essentially is what networking is. It's just making connections with people. And I would say the vast majority of people I've interviewed, at least at some point in their career, obtained a job through that. And what I think is funny about it is that it seems random. Like you ran into that Vietnam veteran and it seems random, but had you not been in the habit of being willing to talk to people, that wouldn't have happened. So it's not as random as people think. It's just building that muscle of making connections with people. And sometimes you're able to help them. Sometimes they're able to help you. And in this case, it worked out really well. And we'll come back, Tommy, in a little bit, because I want to dig into the work that you do in translating resumes and what people watching can learn from that. But let's maybe go back, Robert, and start with you, and then Hector, and then back to Tommy. Could you maybe translate what your title is and what your role is at Verizon? And in particular, I know it helps listeners to hear a little bit about a day in your shoes and kind of what you do throughout the day.
So for my position currently, I'm an area manager with Verizon. I have 6 work centers, over 200 associates, and 12 local managers reporting to me. The easiest way to describe my role, all of the technicians that go out and visit our customers to install services, repair services, the frontline employees, those are my associates, and that's my organization. We're basically responsible for going out and installing FiOS, core, repairing all of those services. And a day in my life, really, the one thing I love about my job is it's very unpredictable. No 2 days are ever the same. So I always start my day in one of my work centers. I'm always very visible to my local managers in the work center and the associates to get out there and motivate them to get out and provide outstanding customer service. And from there, once they're dispatched out in the field, then I go into observation mode where I like to stay on top of what my local managers are doing and make sure they're all on the right course. And if one is off a little bit, to get in there and to give direction so that they go back on the right course.
Awesome. And when you were saying that, Robert, one other thing it reminded me of was, again, for listeners, in your story, it kind of highlighted, I think, the appeal for a company like Verizon is because it's a large organization. Robert talked about in the military, the structure and the organization, and then realizing that Verizon shared a lot of those traits. And we'll talk a little bit about kind of training and onboarding and things like that. But I think that Robert's story is indicative of one of the benefits of going from the military to a larger company is it has a lot of the structure that you're familiar with. And it has to. It's such a massive organization that does so much. The only reason that it's a thriving business is that they're able to effectively lead and organize what I believe over 150,000 employees. So when you think about the sheer scale of that, there's a lot of similarities in with the military, and that eases that transition. What about you, Hector? How would you explain your role?
I would definitely start off with what you just pointed out. There's a lot of similarities, plenty of similarities. And then as an NCO, non-commissioned officer, going up through the ranks, you become second nature. And one of the things that definitely I gravitated towards with this whole process and in the beginning of the process was what the field operations supervisor does, and it starts with taking care of the individual. Definitely help take care of them, motivate them, provide the resources, understand their needs, understand what their job is to be able to provide and assist and get them to be able to perform. And at the end of the day, do the job that we're required to do, which is for our customers. So being able to start off the day, coming in and kind of making sure that all of our guys are well taken care of, that they're doing well, that they have what they need to be able to get out and go out and perform their jobs is the beginning of our day. Making sure that the guys have the work that is loaded on their behalf to be able to go out, be able to manage that throughout the day, take care of any concerns that they have, provide them the resources that they need. Also being able to develop them as we go along. Similar to our NCOs that we are, in charge of caring for, we are also now here, in charge of their development, where we're performing the quarterlies, we're performing their semi-annuals, annual evaluations. We're also ensuring that they're being trained and staying on top of whatever changes come on about, and that they are provided with whatever tools necessary as things change to be able to go out and properly perform and effectively and efficiently perform their jobs. So the similarities with taking care of the individuals, providing the resources, ensuring that they have, the proper motivation to get out of the door and be efficient and effective at what they're doing. And on the supervisor side of the house, being able to manage those metrics. Obviously, everything is measured with how well we perform and how well we're taking care of our customers. Definitely staying on top of that from our end. Again, very, very similar to what I was doing before, just like Tommy Jones pointed out before with, being a company person. It's the same thing. You come out and you talk to your folks every day and you ensure that they're doing well. And you have that communication piece. And at the end of the day, we are definitely effectively communicating to be able to make sure that our job is done. So from the supervisor point, like I said, seamless to me as far as what I was doing previously because of the structure that Verizon does have with what we are required to do daily and the similarities that Robert pointed out before with the structure and how all of that translates to our associates and technicians to be able to get the job done.
Awesome. How about you, Tommy?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more with everything that Hector said. I think, one of the things that I found out about the local manager role and the field operations role that Hector's doing is that was the first job that I found here at Verizon from a recruiting standpoint that there's a large amount of veterans that have the experience that can come into this role and really make a direct impact. So when I first sat down with hiring managers related to this role, and I asked them, what are you looking for in an individual that can be a field operations manager, someone that can manage, these technicians? And what they described to me, I said, well, what you're looking for really is a platoon sergeant / senior non-commissioned officer, or even a platoon leader to come in here and really manage the work effectively, making sure people are getting things done in a timely manner. Safety is at their utmost and everything. And the one thing that I really realized was that they didn't need to have the telecom experience. They had to have the really strong leadership experience. And that is the most impactful piece, I think, to this role, because a lot of the roles, and just like in the military, I can be a platoon sergeant in one company and move to another company, and it's a totally different way of leading and way of being a platoon sergeant. So So I think it was really valuable that we started to have these conversations about what other skills or who else can make an impact in this role. And we started bringing in infantry platoon sergeants who have met and led, number of soldiers, and they started to be really successful, and they're still here with this company. So my first year here at Verizon, we hired 28 local managers in that year, and of those 28, 24 of them were veterans, which is pretty powerful. And they did very well. Now, I'll tell you, if you're not a good non-commissioned officer or a good soldier, you're not going to be a good employee in the corporate world. So that's a given, right? But I think that there's a lot of opportunity, and the biggest thing I've learned from transitioning service members is our goal is to get the hire manager to interact with the actual applicant and the candidate, right? The more we can do that, the more that the hire manager will fall in love with service members the way that I have over my 20 years and realize the value that they bring to an organization.
That's awesome. I remember when I got out of the military, my brother, who's also in the military, had said, I think I was feeling intimidated at the time. And he said, it's easier for you to learn about spreadsheets and about whatever functional knowledge you need than it is for someone who hasn't been in the military to learn about leadership. And what I appreciate what you're saying, Tommy, is the valuing the unique experience that listeners have in the military, the leadership training, the ability to operate in ambiguity and under stress. And that's really valuable. And of course you have to marry that with some sort of functional knowledge and expertise, right? But that's something that you can learn. And I love that stat of the 24 to 28 managers coming from the military. And maybe to kind of keep down that path, I'd love to learn about each of your experience when it comes to what the onboarding process was like and what sort of training you got at Verizon to be able to get up to speed on whatever functional knowledge you needed. And Robert, starting with you, I mean, you've been with Verizon for so long. I imagine you've, when you first joined, you went through training. I imagine there's been training along the way, but could you share with listeners what they need to know about what that onboarding experience was like and any of the training you've received along the way?
So for the onboarding process, when I was hired in Bell Atlantic 22 years ago, it started out with a 3-week school where I went in and learned how to install and repair copper, regular POTS, phone type service. And then from there, I was put into the field and then paired up with one of the senior technicians who I rode with for about 3 months, paired up with that person every day to see how he did the job. And that's really what built the foundation from, when you think about it, where I'm at today. Then as I worked through the technician ranks, I moved on to construction, which is the group that goes out and actually spliced all of the copper phone lines. And then I moved back to cable maintenance in again, where I was dealing with customers, but more on a cable related type troubles. Then when FiOS came into play, I moved into the fiber optic splicing role. So I was really at the forefront of the FiOS build for New Jersey, where I led new hired technicians that were being onboarded off the street and trained 8 of them. And I really mirrored the way that I was onboarded originally as a technician with them. I made sure that they were paired up with really good technicians so they can see the right way to do things, and then eventually let them on their own so they can start making their own decisions. Then when I got promoted to local manager, I was paired up with another really good local manager, and this is something that I do with Hector and anyone else that I onboard. I want to make sure that they're sitting next to somebody that really knows the job so that person can assist to bring them up to speed. I also like having the new person with the experienced local manager because, as crazy as this might sound, one of the most exciting things about bringing Hector on board was I was bringing somebody in who sees the world a little differently than I do. I have 22 years with the phone company, and I'm sure there's a lot of things and decisions that I make that are sort of tunnel visioned, where Hector is coming in now and he can come at me with a completely different perspective, where he may see, hey, look, let's try it this way. Maybe that way will work a little better. And odds are he could be right. So it's good to have someone with that different perspective sitting next to somebody who I know is good, so that they can work together to come up with really what's the best solution for our technicians and our customers.
That's great. And I come from a very different perspective. I've spent the last 10 years since the military in early stage technology startups. And I find myself, as Robert's described his experience, I'm jealous of the 3 weeks of training that he had. And I love this thought of pairing with someone with more experience. And, my background or my experience has been much more, there's been no training, there's been no guidance. It's just kind of being thrown into the deep end. And so what I like about what you're saying is the, process through which they're able to impart skills pretty rapidly and provide mentorship, and how appealing and valuable that is for anyone. So that's great to hear. Hector, what's your experience been like?
I'm sorry, Justin, I didn't hear.
Yeah, I was just saying, Hector, what was your experience like since you very recently went through onboarding and training?
I would like to use the word you just used, because mentorship was key. My mentorship actually began at the beginning of the corporate fellowship program back in August. So before I even was an official hire, that 12-week program gave me the opportunity to be mentored, not only by one of the local managers that Robert Brandt had assigned to kind of welcome me on and get me involved with the personnel and the processes, but also the technician side of the house. So during those 12 weeks, I was exposed to the personnel. I was exposed to the processes, the systems, the intricacies behind both an installation and maintenance crew, as well as a construction crew. So I was able to split a little bit of time between the two and get a better understanding of what the company and organization is behind the scenes. So that mentorship for those 12 weeks, sitting again with some of the local managers, again for the I&M, installation and maintenance, and the construction, and also the ride-alongs that I did with the technicians. I would spend a day with various technicians, at least 3 days out of the week, go out with one individual for the whole day. And it gave me the opportunity to interact with the customers. It gave me the opportunity to put my hands on the work that is being done. Kind of like what Thomas pointed out before, it doesn't necessarily have to, we don't necessarily have to have that, IT background per se, because of the intangibles that we're bringing on. But it does help to be able to see it firsthand with the folks that are out there doing the day-to-day grind. So having that experience, phenomenal. It really opened up my eyes to what they did, and really give me a different appreciation for what the job is. So that mentorship for those 12 weeks, crucial. It definitely was a very, very helpful opportunity during that 12-week time period. And then as far as continuous training, obviously, there is online requirements that I have to do. I know that there is going to be a continued mentorship, for the next several weeks as I finish my onboarding process here now. And then, again, just the opportunity that I had with the folks. Key word, like you said, mentorship was, in my opinion, the best way to onboard throughout this entire process. Just the knowledge, the experience, to see hands-on, and then the training wheels got taken off a little bit at the end of the 12-week programs, where they were like, okay, let's see how you perform now, and here's the system, and here I am answering calls and kind of removing roadblocks and talking to the guys individually and getting them motivated and stuff like that. Was it was good to see that. First day, I'm very apprehensive, and by the end of the 12-week program, I'm taking charge and lead, and hey, we're making decisions. We're going to go for it, and this is how we're going to make it happen. So it's a very, very good opportunity to have done the onboarding process that way.
That's awesome. And for listeners, I'd say what Hector is saying for me kind of complements what Tommy was saying. So on the one hand, what Tommy had said was about what I would hope listeners would take away is to feel emboldened as you enter your civilian career, to know that you bring these leadership skills, you bring all of these things. But the flip side of that, and one of the trends I've seen in these interviews, is that oftentimes people in the military underestimate the work they need to do to catch up in other areas. And what I love about what Hector is saying is, he's talking about these last 12 weeks and this formal training process and all the ways in which he's learning from others and drinking from a fire hose, just sucking in so much knowledge. And I think that's I don't say it to intimidate listeners, but to just be a reminder of, yes, there's a lot you don't know. Whatever job you go into, there is a lot you don't know. And so approaching that with humility and with the understanding that you're going to need to learn a lot to be able to be useful, that the skills you have from the military are likely not sufficient for whatever job you're going into, but to know that you can learn it, that you can pick it up on the way. Tommy, what was your process like in terms of training and onboarding?
So mine was similar too. I mean, I had a mentor when I came on. I had everybody, the willingness and the teamwork to help me be successful all the way through the onboarding process. Again, people didn't understand what I brought to the table, so it was hard for them at first to mentor me. So when I first came in, I came in as an individual contributor. So I left a company of leading 198 people, right? And then being an individual contributor in a role that was really pretty junior. But I was okay with that. I mean, it was an opportunity for me to see things through different lenses, like Robert was saying. And it also gave me an opportunity to get promoted through the ranks. That's one of the things that I think I love about Verizon, is that it's a performance-based organization. So whatever you put into it is what you're going to get out of it. And your work will be recognized, and you'll be promoted accordingly based off your work. In the military, it's, time and service, time and grade is when you're eligible. It's really now when you're ready, and they see the potential in you, there's a lot of opportunities for you to move up quickly in the ranks. Now, from an onboarding perspective, what we've tried to adopt is the military team. We send out pre-hire emails to veterans that have been selected and ready, that are going to be onboarding prior to them coming on board at Verizon. And it allows them to help connect with us, ask questions, just so that they have an understanding of what they're getting into, just to provide some additional resources for them as well. And then we do that again post-hire. So post-hire, we'll basically send them a list of resources, introduce them to the Veterans Advisory Board, which is our employee resource group for them, show them who the intranet. We have an internal intranet that's a military connection where they could, post comments and meet with other veterans digitally. So if they have any questions, it's kind of like their safe zone. They can reach out to other veterans in there and just connect. We know that one of the things that happens when someone is onboarded, any new hire, military, not, the one connection that they have is always with their recruiter. So we try to maintain that communication with them and help do a soft landing on the back end of it. Because as they come on and they learn about benefits, the one person that they had spent intimate time with was their recruiter. Hector's in a great situation where he had the opportunity to do, a 12-week internship, so to speak, or fellowship with a team. So he's been able to ask those questions and has a better understanding. Therefore, he's better equipped to help others as they start to go through this transition.
That's great. One of the things I appreciate about that is one of the most commonly cited things that people on the show have talked about missing is when they leave the military, whether they expect it or not, they usually miss the community and connection with their the people they serve with. And what I like about what Tommy's saying is with Verizon's intranet there, it's just another way to get plugged in and connected with people with a shared background. And for me, when I left the military, it's different. Like, well, I was in the Navy, and so you have that camaraderie there. Since then, I run into anyone in any branch of service. It's just, you have so much in common. There's so many shared values and history, and terminology and all these things that I took for granted in the military. And I think that's an advantage of working at a place with Verizon is you've got a lot of other veterans. You've got that community there for you if you want that, and that's really exciting to hear. I was also curious. Just I think it's helpful for listeners to sometimes understand what awaits on the other side that they might not expect. And Robert, I'm wondering, what has been different in your life at Verizon from the military, or what has been one of the contrasts from, like, when you look at your job and your work and your life in the military, what's some of the differences that stand out now in your life at Verizon?
Well, I mean, the most obvious for me, and it's one thing I couldn't ever let go of, is the haircut. When I first came into Verizon, for the first year and a half, 2 years, I was still holding the high and tight. I could not let it go. And since then, I'm letting it grow a little on the side here. I mean, that was really the biggest thing, that was different for me. As I came into Verizon, I'm going to be honest, like the transition was a lot smoother than I would have ever thought. As I came in, like Thomas said, there's veterans everywhere. Everywhere you go, I have 12 local managers, and of those 12 local managers, almost 50% of them have served in one branch or another. So, and as Hector is onboarded through my team, that door is open for him. Like he'll have the opportunity to go and sit with every single one of my local managers to see how they lead, because I believe that there's no such thing as a perfect leader. We all do it a little different. And what I like to see is my local managers go and sit with the other local managers and pick the things they like from that person, and then bring it back and morph it into their style. So really, for me, as crazy as it might sound, it was the haircut. That was the hardest thing for me to transition. And even then, in 22 years, I'm not completely away from it, but it's a little bit longer now than it was when I first got hired.
This is the worst interview to be doing by video right now, because my long hair is in contrast to your somewhat relaxed high and tight. I love that though too. And the other thing I take away from what you're saying, Robert, is just the constantly learning aspect of the importance of just, it sounds like you're always picking up things from other people, and that's great to always be learning and growing in your role. Hector, what about for you? What's some of the differences, especially you're just coming from the military right now?
The differences I would definitely have to say is not too many that I've experienced yet. Because like they both pointed out, I have guys here that have actually served before. So that part of it, of the camaraderie, and the other guys themselves who haven't even served, just the whole team aspect of how it is every morning and how we're all getting together. We're all saying, the mornings and, hey, how's it going? What you got going on? This, that, and the other. That whole team aspect of it hasn't changed, So there hasn't been, in my opinion, for myself at least, too much of a, I don't even want to say a hardship, because there really isn't a hardship. There isn't anything that I've experienced that can contrast, but taking off the uniform has definitely been a different, something to get used to, in my opinion. I knew what I was wearing every day. Today, I had to actually go in the closet and pick something else out. I'm not wearing a uniform, wear my boots and this, that, and the other. So the guys actually make fun of me here because they're like, hey, your boots ain't dirty yet. And I was like, well, that's because I clean them every night. So that's just, the mentality of things. But there hasn't been too much of a difference that I would say it's something that I totally miss yet. As you can see, I will not let it grow. It's not going to happen, just like Robert pointed out. But that's for personal reasons. And this is a little bit different. So it's just very minor differences, nothing too big that I would say is a contrast to what I was experiencing before as to what I'm experiencing now.
Awesome. How about you, Tommy?
So I've had a similar, obviously my hair is actually starting to fall out a little bit here, and I went away from the high and tight. I've basically adapted to my environment, right? So I think that, when I first came to Verizon, I wear a suit and tie every day. in the headquarters, and that was the culture that I felt was going on in Verizon at that point. And then Verizon has evolved into more of a tech savvy culture, and you know, that's one of the things I think that you know, being a good service member and a good employee is you adapt to the environment, and you move on, and so from a look and feel, how you wear your clothes and what you wear, and your long hair like you have, Justin. I can't grow it that long, so you know. But I would say that, you know, you have to be adaptable. That's the key thing. And if you're adaptable and you can understand the environment and don't sacrifice your values by doing that as well, I think that you know, it's okay. You know, I used to same thing. I'd shave every day here at Verizon. Now I push the limits a little bit. I try to shave, you know, once in a while, you know, but and I also know my environment, right? So I know when I'm going to executive leadership meetings, I know what to wear, I know how to dress. But it's just being approachable and the environment that you set. I have so many life experiences from the military that I try to impose that into all the people that I work with. You know, so I think that that's one of the great things that I'm learning on the back end, is to continue to be yourself. And that will also be really important as you transition, because I didn't want to be somebody I wasn't in the corporate environment. You know, I stayed true to who I was, and I think that that has been very valuable to me. Some of the other challenges that I had is you know, my resume didn't look like the civilian counterpart, right? And my experiences from a corporate environment wasn't that. But being confident enough to say, hey, listen, I don't know that, but I'm going to be able to, I will definitely work on that. And having leaders give me the opportunity to showcase, you know, that I can do that was great. I miss the camaraderie. I've created that camaraderie in my team. But, you know, sometimes you feel like you're alone on an island when you first come through the door, especially if you're an individual contributor, and you're trying to, you know, embrace a new team. Whereas in the military, you know, it's more of they embrace you right away. I mean, there's no barriers right there. Everybody's wearing the same, you know, uniform. You know, there's no diversity questions or anything in play. I mean, you're just, you bleed red, white, and blue. So, you know, that's one of the things is you got to understand your environment in the civilian world. It's just a little bit different.
Awesome. And I'd love to kind of maybe switch gears a little bit and talk about joining Verizon and what, you know, for listeners who are interested in this. I wanted to start first with you, Tommy. You know, some of the things that have stood out from what you've said is, first of all, you know, it sounds like you want to get a veteran in front of a hiring manager as soon as possible. Like once they're face to face, they're pretty good, which I can imagine most people in the military, I think, excel on that personal level, that relational level. And you also talked about, you know, the work that you've done helping translate some resumes. So I'm curious what advice you have for listeners about maybe anything that stands out about resumes, any common mistakes that you see with people who are doing their resume, and then also any advice you have on how to get that interview, how to actually get so that they can be in front of a hiring manager when they're in that position to succeed.
Yeah, I think from a resume standpoint, you know, there's so many different templates out there. And, you know, I think beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? So whoever is reading the resume, you know, it may be a recruiter, it may be a hiring manager. And unfortunately, that is something that is the first barrier in your employment and finding employment opportunities, right? So if there's obviously spell checks or anything like that, you know, spelling errors and stuff like that, that's going to be, you know, a red flag. But again, it's the person that is reading it is what you want to help understand, right? So I would say that the most important part of a resume would be hit them with bullets in the beginning of what your qualifications are and what you can do for that company, and be it as tailored as you possibly can towards the job. And then also do your research when it comes, related to that in the resume. Now, how I translate the resumes to hiring managers. So we do some training. We actually, on a quarterly basis, we train our recruiters. We have a Verizon training that goes on. It's called Verizon Recruiting 101 and Verizon Recruiting 102. So it's recruiting at Verizon, sorry, RAV1 and RAV2. And what we do is we send our recruiters through that. And part of that is about understanding, the ranks of the military, understanding, what resources they have available into hiring veterans or attracting veterans to Verizon. Then we also do that for hiring managers as well. We have a training set aside for hiring managers and HRBPs that allows them to learn a little bit more about it, about the veterans and what skills they bring to it. The other thing I think that we do is our military recruitment team, their role is to help translate the skills and be like a liaison to the recruiter and to the hiring manager. So when I first came on board, I was seeing resumes. I had a Navy commander that had applied, who had a master's degree in human resources, was working on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and he had a PMP, and most of his time was as a pilot, but some of his staff role was in the Joint Chiefs of Staff position. And he was applying to a human resource position in a very strategic role around strategy and plans. And he was rejected right away. So I looked at the resume and I walked over to the recruiter. I'm like, can you explain to me why you didn't qualify this guy? She's like, well, I just don't see where he's got, the strategy and the planning operations. I'm like, okay, do you understand what the Joint Chiefs of Staff's job is? They're in charge of all of the military. The Joint Chiefs of Staff is the most intense level of planning and strategic planning you can imagine in all of any organization. And so I kind of went deeper into, what a J3 does and talked a little bit about what he did as a commander, as an 05 in the Navy. And she was like, wow, I would have never got that from a resume, right? And I don't know how you can't really write that up on a resume. There's a lot of things that you have as a resource that you can do to help get you in the door, but I don't know if the resume is the only thing that you should do if you're trying to find employment opportunities. Again, the networking is so important. So I think that interaction is really important. What I've told other veterans to do, and I think that this is something that is very, very valuable to your listeners and to anybody that's trying to find a job. Everybody is on LinkedIn nowadays, right? And the job that you want, there's a 99% chance that someone already has that job in that same company and they're on LinkedIn, right? So in the military, you're taught to gather intelligence. You're taught to understand your environment. So what I tell veterans is, go to Verizon's site, find the job you're looking for, and not necessarily apply yet, right? Find something that really interests you, and we'll use Robert as an example. So if I was looking and I see that there's an area manager role in New Jersey for Verizon, what I would do is I would take that intelligence and I would go back to LinkedIn, and in the top, I would type in area manager, New Jersey, Verizon, and anybody that with that title would come up. And Robert might be one of those people. And I don't know if Robert was a veteran, or I didn't know if Robert was a veteran, right? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my free LinkedIn account that I have from LinkedIn for a year, and I'm going to start utilizing that for my benefit. And I'm going to say, hey, Robert, I'm transitioning out of military. I got a telecommunications background. I'm an E8, Master Sergeant, retired First Sergeant. Hey, would you mind picking up the phone and tell me a little bit more about the area manager role? And I think that if more of that happens, that high-touch engagement, and we do a little bit more of that, Robert's going to tell me a lot of things, Robert might, one, become my mentor. Two, Robert might become my advocate, and maybe the person that's going to his director saying, you know, I'm talking to a guy right now that was actually looking at another area manager role in New Jersey who I think would be a perfect fit. Or he say, hey, you know, Tommy, right now you're not ready for an area manager, but we have field operations and local manager positions that you may be better suited for. Or Verizon doesn't have that opportunity. You know, I think somebody in AT&T might have that opportunity, and I have a friend that works over there. So, you know, that's, I think, the most important aspect of transitioning and finding employment is utilizing the, you know, the network that you have and creating that network.
I think that that's such great advice and applicable to any career path. But I love what Tommy's pointing out there, like finding the person on the inside and knowing, going into this, knowing that every single person who's served in the military, their desire is to help you. They will take the call, and just bear in mind that people are busy. Like I kind of go into these things assuming that you send 5 emails, you're going to get 1 response.
Right.
And just know that all 5 of those people want to help you. 4 of them are busy. 4 of them lose track of the email. Like their intention is to help you, but things just get lost in the noise. That we don't need to talk about it, but I'm sure all 3 of you get thousands of emails every single month. It's just hard to keep track. So know that people want to help you. But I love what Tommy's saying of just slowing down a little bit, finding that person inside. Not only can they help you better understand the landscape, better understand the role, better understand how to apply to it, but also they could be the person to help you fast track that resume or help you get through that. And yeah, I think that's incredible advice.
Hey, Justin, and I think the other thing is that, you know, growing up, I knew a lot of people, like fathers were in the military, and now I think people know others in the military through third party, right? So that it's not as close and as intimate with someone that is in their family. Like not everybody serves as much as they used to. The military force is smaller than it ever has. And then I also think that we don't give enough credit to the civilian population on how much they really do want to help service members. They just don't know how. And by you reaching out to them, you know, that's, you know, volunteerism is huge in companies, and helping others is huge in large corporations like Verizon. So I don't want to underestimate the good Samaritan piece of the civilian population, because I think they want to help, they don't know how to help. So they donate to different organizations. But if they can make a direct impact and say, I helped Tommy, I helped Hector, you know, that's even more powerful. And I think that, you know, so don't always gravitate towards the veteran. Don't always gravitate toward the HR and the recruiters as much when you start to reach out on LinkedIn. More of the professional aspect of it, and really try to learn about that role. And you'll be pleasantly surprised at how many people really do want to help you and see you land on your feet and be successful.
That's great. And for listeners, I'll include a link in the show notes. Tommy talked about LinkedIn has a great program where they will give military veterans a year of free access to I forget what they call it, but their premium account. And so I'll put a link in the show notes so you can find that there. And when you're ready, you can take advantage of that. I just wanted to make space, Robert and Hector, in case you have anything to add about advice about applying to Verizon or how to stand out in the application process.
So Justin, when the applicant gets to the phase where they're in front of me, it's actually in the interview. So the one piece of advice that I can give, and I'm working on this myself till to this day, don't undersell your leadership. When you walk into that room, just be confident and talk about leadership. That's what I look for as I'm going through the application process. I can train anybody to do this job, but the leadership side of it, that comes more natural. So really, when you're in that room, talk about leadership. That's the best advice that I can give.
That's great. And I know that many, many, many people on the show have talked about some of the things that are common are using I instead of we, being able to speak about your accomplishments as a leader. I think that it's just helpful for listeners to bear in mind that you're coming from a culture where we really prize the team. It's a very selfless environment. And so just understand that your natural bias is to not boast, to not speak about what you accomplished, to instead boost up the team. And those are beautiful attributes. But one of the things I take away from what Robert's saying is that you need to be able to speak about what you accomplished as a leader, and to do it in a natural and natural way. And I'll put in the show notes a link to a gentleman, Mark Horstman, who is a Army veteran. He's done over 1,500 podcast interviews and worked with presidents and about leadership. But he has done 2 interviews now on Beyond the Uniform, and talks about how to prepare for interviews, talks about how to craft the stories that you can tell.
Right.
And I think that goes a long way. Hector, anything to add to any of that?
If I can, I'll definitely voice what have said. I think it's very, very important, as well as with you, what you've pointed out. I would definitely say to set realistic expectations as well. We definitely need to sometimes, just like Robert pointed out, we do need to demonstrate our capabilities, but we have to also set realistic expectations along with those capabilities. Transitioning out, we can't come in expecting to run, a company of 400 individuals without having some of the experience that is required to be able to do so. Definitely rehearse, definitely take the time to research, look at values for the companies, look at the culture. Sometimes getting into an organization because of a particular prestige name doesn't necessarily mean it's a right fit for the individual. So understanding the culture, prime example, again, we talked about this before, the similarities between the structure that I was used to and the structure that I'm in now. The culture that I've been experiencing so far has been a culture of growth, positive, communication. It is an organization that values, not just customers, but the employees. So we do have to have, again, that research that Thomas pointed out before, ensuring that we do know what we're walking into. Take it seriously, definitely write it down, revise it, review it, write it down again. Make sure that you are well prepared, that you do know what you're talking about, and that you get away from jargon. Not everyone that we talk to, like Tom pointed out, don't necessarily reach out for a military veteran, but if you're speaking with someone that doesn't have the background and they don't understand, some of the conversations, or they don't understand some of the things that you have done or that you've been experienced in or have had the privilege of working in, you have to be able to translate that over to those civilian terms per se. It's getting away from the jargon and getting away from some of the language that we are used to in our day-to-day lives in the Army or whatever military service we're serving in. And again, using the SFL resources, the Soldier for Life resources, the resume writers, the individuals that can sit down with you and help you prepare for the interview, and those workshops, in my opinion, value added. Those are sometimes underutilized, but they are huge value to any individual. And it's not just, again, for soldiers retiring, it's for soldiers, whether you've done your, first enlistment period or you're in your second term and you decide that, the service is no longer, for you and you're transitioning out. Again, use the services from resume writing to interview skills to transitioning to even getting into these formal sites that you just pointed out, like LinkedIn, Glassdoor. You have so many different mentorship platforms out there that service members are capable of joining to help ease that transition over and expose them to different positions and organizations that they may not have thought of previously.
I like that. And 2 things just to point out for listeners. First of all, I love what Hector is saying about managing your expectations. It seems like in the 240 episodes I've done, the further you move away from the military, the more you have to take a step back. So I did an interview with this guy, Chris Pestle, who went from the Army to being a photographer. and he went from making whatever, he was a captain in the Army, whatever Captain 03s make in the Army, to making 30,000 a year, if that. And that's a pretty big shift from the Army to photography. There's not a lot of overlap. If you go into government contracting or a near adjacent, it's probably easier to preserve that salary. But I like the way that Hector put that in terms of managing expectations. Like, just realize that if you're making that transition, you might not be making the same that you were in the military. You will likely get back to that and exceed that, but it's not going to happen right away. And so that's one thing that I wanted to point out. And then the second thing of Hector pointing out the culture, I think that when Tommy was talking about reaching out to people on LinkedIn, that's another benefit. When you have these real or virtual coffee chats, you're getting to know the culture. And, for me, I went into submarines from the Naval Academy, and I had plenty of time to sit down with people who were interested in submarines and get to know them, and get to know Marines and get to know people in surface. And in those conversations, you get to know the culture. You get to know what the DNA is of each organization and where you fit in. And that's another advantage if you take the initiative to reach out to people, either veteran or non-veteran in an organization. You start to get a sense of what the values are, like Hector talked about. You get the sense of what the culture is like, what the people are like. And that's more important, in my opinion, than the salary and the title, is making sure that you're a good fit and that they're a good fit for you.
Yeah, I would add also is, one of the things Hector said is the preparation piece of it. And some of the things that I usually say is, throw as much in your rucksack or in your backpack as you possibly can. Take advantage of everything that the transition services offer to you, and put all of that stuff in your rucksack, right? And I kind of equate it to like evaluating the casualty, knowing the 8 steps to evaluating the casualty. You need to know them intimately and know them inside and out, and hope you never need to use them, right? And I think that that's similar to transition, right? You gotta know every resource that you can use, and try to throw as much in your backpack as you possibly can, and hopefully you don't need to use it all. But you don't want to be on the other side and, you've ETS'd or got out of the military and like, damn, I should have took an opportunity to take care of this training, or I didn't join the fellowship program. I heard about it now, right? I think, understanding, again, the intelligence part of of being in the military is gathering all the things that you have, resources you have available to you, and getting that skill set, and all those skills in your rucksack for you.
That's awesome. And then starting with Robert, I'd love to hear for listeners, any reasons why they should consider a career at Verizon, or things that they might find appealing about working at Verizon, or any thoughts on why they should consider applying there?
I can speak for my organization, which the applicants that I'm normally accepting are for the local manager role, which is what Hector is in. The one benefit that I see for someone coming out of the military and applying for this position is that it's team-based. Every day when you're in front of your team, it's almost like managing a platoon. I was a squad leader in the Marine Corps, and as I was a local manager, I treated my team the same as I did my squad back when I was in the Marine Corps. So coming out, again, when I talk about the leadership in the interview, that's what I look for, because every day you're motivating your team to go out and perform. It's the same thing that a lot of these folks coming out of the military do every day in the military.
Awesome. Hector, how about you?
I would definitely have to say on to that, and I agree 100%. The team aspect of it, the communication piece aspect of it. I mean, I would tell you that research was a huge part of this. Again, suddenly you hear Verizon, and the first thing that comes to mind is, a wireless provider, at a mall or a plaza or something like that. You really don't think about, like you pointed out before, an organization that has 150,000 plus employees with various functions, various responsibilities, and the intricacies and the behind the scenes kind of work that actually is in place to support what our customers receive. we really don't understand sometimes or take the time to know what it is. So the opportunities are there. The opportunities wholeheartedly are there. The environment, the team aspect of it, like Robert pointed out, the communication side of the house, the culture, the values. There are various reasons why personally an individual should look into it and just dig in a little bit deeper just to kind of, scratch the surface of what is in this company that we call Verizon, my home now, my team. So when you really, again, coming from the outside in, and you take the time to just, again, research what your responsibilities were or are currently in the service and what they translate to in the civilian side of the house, I guarantee you're going to see hits come up for this company. I guarantee it. But again, it's a perception that most of the people that I talk to and I have talked to, and even as I transition out and they ask me, what I was going to be doing or what company I was going to go and be a part of. And I would say Verizon, the first thing they would say, oh, you're going to sell cell phones. No, not necessarily. I'm actually going to be helping the infrastructure behind that as well as the other iron side of the house to be able to support, what our folks are actually experiencing in their residences and businesses. So until I'm able to explain some of those things to them, they really don't see the big picture. So I would say, again, from my point of view is understanding what the company is, understanding what the company's culture is, what the values are, and what the different opportunities are that I would definitely say 95% of the folks that are in the service can relate to within this company.
That's great. And it's a good point about the breadth of opportunity available at a company like Verizon. When you've got 150,000 people, there's so many different groups, there's so many different functions. And I think that Robert is a good case study in this, to have a 22-year career where you grow up with the organization and to the point now where Robert will soon be overseeing over 290 people, which, is a mind-boggling. It's just a mind-boggling situation. That's for me, that's nearly 1.5 submarines worth of people that he's leading. And to start as a technician and work your way up, there's not a lot of organizations that have the scale to be able to allow you to grow with that and to train you and develop you into that role. So I think what Hector's speaking to, that breadth is very appealing. That from a front-end view, most people might only know Verizon or a company of that size for one specific thing. But to be a company of that size, there's so much infrastructure behind the scenes and so many, it's like that iceberg. You're seeing the 10% and there's the 90% underneath that you might not even be familiar with. And that kind of goes back to Tommy's point about doing the research on LinkedIn, starting to build your mental picture of what the different areas are, because you may only be familiar with one aspect, but there's, you might talk to someone and realize, hey, there's 20 other jobs that you might be interested in, or 20 other types of roles that may be well suited for you, and you don't even know about it. And the only way, in my view, the fastest way to figure those out is through those conversations where someone on the inside can point you in the right direction and help you navigate what otherwise would be pretty intimidating. Tommy, how about you? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I would just say similar to, Verizon's a self-sustaining organization, right? Similar to the military. And when I tell people about Verizon, I say, we have everything besides cooks and musicians. And if we don't, we basically go out and contract them out if we need them. But I mean, we have an S1, we have an S2, we have an S3, we have an S4, S6. I mean, we have all of the same things that a military has. And it's larger, because of the responsibilities that they have. So like you said, the 10% of the population is customer facing, but it takes a lot to run this organization. So we have a gigantic supply chain, project manager roles in every aspect of it. We have an in-house marketing agency and advertising agency. You think about all the internal and external communications that needs to happen from that standpoint. Legal. We have a union population, so understanding the labor agreements and all that is something that you don't understand. A lot of jobs are responsible for that in Verizon. So again, bottom line is I can't emphasize enough doing the research and understanding the landscape of each company. They're all very similar. Some companies might have one HR person who is in charge of all the benefits, talent acquisition, and everything. You know, when you have such a large company like Verizon, there's 400 recruiters, there's 400 HR BPs, you know, again, understanding the landscape.
Awesome. Well, I always like to leave one final question, which is open-ended. And this comes more from me having been on panels or interviews where there's something I love to share, but the person never asks a question relevant to it. And so I'd love to start with Robert and go around and just kind of make any space for anything we haven't talked about that you want to share with listeners, or any kind of final thoughts that you want to impart before we wrap up.
No, I mean, I'll go back to where I was talking before about, you know, when you're in the interview, just do not undersell your leadership that you have in the military. Again, it's something that I'm working on to this day on myself. And as recent as my most recent interview for the area manager position, I was actually using examples from when I was a PFC in the Marine Corps 20 years ago. So I'm still going back to those examples to answer questions about leadership. So don't hold back with selling yourself and the leadership that you can, you know, bring to Verizon.
Awesome. How about you, Hector?
I would definitely say to take charge of whatever transition time period you're going through. You know, don't just rely on, you know, oh, it's going to happen, or I will end up in, or I will get, you know. No, don't leave those questions up for somebody else to answer. I would definitely say take charge of what it is that you're going through and what you want to get out of it. And if you put forth the effort, like we've been talking about this entire time, you know, with the preparation and researching and talking and networking, it will be a fruitful transition. It will be, regardless of what that transition is going to be. But it is, you know, not being timid, like Robert pointed out, definitely taking a hold of it and preparing yourself. You know, again, just because you have worn the uniform for however long you've worn it does not necessarily mean that you will get. Again, you have to put your name there. You have to be able to get in front of people. You have to be able to get the preparation underway and make sure that you are setting those expectations for yourself that at the end of the day, you will be able to achieve.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it relates to what Robert said, but also Hector's sharing is something I'm still trying to get my head around, but it's like I view people in the military as very autonomous, very independent, very creative, very capable of just breaking through obstacles to achieve an objective. And at the same time, there's a lot about the military where things are spoon-fed to you. Your dental checkups, medical checkups, pay, housing allowance, like everything is kind of compartmentalized in a way where you can just sit back and receive.
Right.
And what I'm taking away from what, you know, first Robert said is you have to exhibit a certain amount of self-service. Like you need to be able to walk in and sell your leadership abilities. You need to be able to speak on your behalf because no one else is going to do it for you. You have to go into that interview and speak about what you've accomplished because otherwise no one will know. And it's also what I take away from what Hector's saying is like, command your own transition. Like, yes, there are the TAPS courses, there are resources for you, but I love that analogy that Tommy used earlier of filling your rucksack. Like just start cramming it in. Like you are like that ownership aspect. You are the only person responsible for your transition. So really having ownership of that, packing in the skills you need, doing what you need to do to have that successful transition, because ultimately you are the only person responsible for that.
Justin, if I can add to that real quick. And the reason I brought that up, Justin, is since September, I have ran into 4 prior service members who I've had the pleasure of running into, and we've been talking, and they asked me questions. And they went through a similar transition, but they checked the block. Just like you pointed out, some things were spoon-fed with the PHA, your physical, your dental, your this, that, and the other. So when they were going through the TAP process of their transition, there was a check the block. They didn't, and I have since referred them back to that point. Look, you need to do this. You need to go back through this process, because they were under the impression that, okay, I'm transitioning out and I am going to fall into whatever it is that I am going to be doing. And that wasn't the case. That's the reason I brought that up. You have to take ownership of what it is that you're doing. Because at the end of the day, when you take the uniform off, again, the company, the service is going to continue. They're going to continue the mission without you. You have to prepare yourself for that transition. So again, I've unfortunately had that conversation with 4 folks since September, but at least get them back on the right track. Hey, you do need resources. You do need to talk to these individuals. You need to do this for yourself as well. They were expecting that they were going to be handed something that they unfortunately were not. So that's why.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I think it's one of the biggest disservices we do to the people in our military right now is almost propping up a sense of entitlement or expectation of receiving more than they will. And as I think everyone's pointed out today, civilians and veterans all want to help you. They often don't know how, and to not expect an easy transition, to not expect to easily find a job. If you're wrong, great, you put in more effort and it is easy, but at the very least, it sets the expectation of over preparing, which I think is generally an advisable path. Tommy, how about you? What would you add before we wrap up?
I would just say stay positive. Hopefully it's easier for you, but from my experience, it's going to be difficult. And I would say that right now the unemployment rate is very low, which makes it even more of a challenge in finding employment opportunities. So the first opportunity that you come across may not be, the opportunity that you want to foresee you doing yourself in the future, but I think it's an opportunity you should jump on and take advantage of, and just continue to add that to your resume so that you're building experiences. What you don't want to do is remain stagnant and swim against the stream and make sure that you're not doing the right thing by continuing to develop yourself.
Awesome. Well, thank all 3 of you for your time. I appreciate Verizon making this happen. This has been a panel months in the making, but Robert, Hector, and Tommy, I appreciate your taking the time from a busy schedule amidst the holidays to share your perspective. And for listeners, in the show notes, I'll have links to each of their LinkedIn profiles in case you want to do some online stalking afterwards, or maybe even reach out to ask some follow-up questions that we weren't able to cover today. But yeah, thank you very much. And thank you also. I know you're helping, constantly helping the veteran community and helping them navigate Verizon. So thank you for the work that you do there.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks, gentlemen.
All right. Well, thank you for listening and or watching this interview. Let me know what you think. You can always drop us a note at beyondtheuniform.io in the contact us page. You can also email me at justin@beyondtheuniform.io. Would love any feedback on if you'd like us to do more interviews in this way. Special thanks to Verizon for making this interview happen. It has been months in the works, and there's more interviews coming your way with perspectives at Verizon. Special thanks to Steve Bain for making this happen. Wanted to thank our team here at Beyond the Uniform. Kathleen Dillon is responsible for our show notes. She writes text transcripts of every episode, which helps with those of you who don't want to listen to my voice and would rather skim through, but it also helps with our search engine optimization to help more veterans find Beyond the Uniform as a resource. Special thanks to Steve Bain. Steve does all of our sponsorship opportunities. He lines up our guests and basically makes my life significantly easier. Andrew Woolridge does all our data and analytics, helps us understand, because with the podcast we don't hear from a lot of people, but he helps us understand through the data what interviews and what types of interviews are working so we can do more of them. Special thanks to Andrew Robinson, who does all of our social media and helps us grow and expand our audience. I will be back next week with more interviews of military veterans in their civilian career. Special plug to check out Beyond the Uniform's coaching program. It is a not free, it is a subsidized service where we put you in contact with professional coaches, both executive coaches and career coaches, who are trained to help you figure out your next career move, whether that's staying in the military, getting out of the military, or whether you've been out of the military for years and you're trying to figure out your next career move. I have worked with an executive coach for over 5 years. I find it absolutely essential as a founder and CEO of a company trying to figure out what to do, having that sounding board, having a constant source of information to really figure out what I need to do and what I'm wanting to do, what my values are, what all sorts of great things that we cover. I know that in the military world, a lot of services out there are free. This one is not. The podcast is absolutely free. The coaching program, there's just no way for us to do that with quality for free. But I guarantee you, any money you spend on this will return multiple dividends to you, a high return on investment in terms of the value you take away. We'll be doing a show pretty soon to share perspectives of people who have gone through the program, and the impact is massive. So check that out. Have a great week, and see you or hear you soon. Bye.